Everywhere I look, I see the repulsive sight of hundreds, thousands of revolting little children.
You know, there was a very specific era in the 1980s for kids' movies when studios looked at Nightmare Fuel and said, yeah, no problem, kids can handle that. Film it, sell it, they'll love it. And I'm talking about movies that are technically targeted towards families and kids, but left us on the living room carpets loving them, but as adults looking back saying, was that really for kids at the time? Because the 80s movies had a habit of going darker, weirder, scarier, and occasionally way more emotionally intense than anything labeled family entertainment today. And that's why I am back with volume 2 of 80s kids movies that were way too adult. The first video on this topic has been blowing up, which tells me I'm not the only one who grew up back then and loved those movies, but is a little bit battle scarred and just as happy as can be that I had that era to watch those movies that were a little outside the comfort zone for parents and kids today. So we're going to dive into 10 more movies from the 80s that were totally awesome and totally way more adult than we thought. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so jumping right into the list, these are pretty well ranked here, but I don't have a tight ranking on them, though number one I think might be the unquestioned GOAT in this category. And there were a lot of you in the comments on the first volume that were like, how is this movie not in here? Listen, I only usually do 10 movies per list, and this time the 80s was just so rich with movies that could fit this category, which is why this generation is awesome and we're tough and nothing offends us or bothers us. So let's jump right into the list of these movies that made us here, starting at number 10 with The Dark Crystal.
I don't have wings.
Of course not. You're a boy.
I loved this movie as a kid. It also kind of gave me nightmares, just that uncanny valley weird feel to it. The Dark Crystal is technically a fantasy about trying to restore balance to the world by repairing a magic crystal, but the description leaves out the part where the villains are some of the creepiest creatures ever put in a family movie. They're like these grotesque, decaying, power-hungry little monsters, and the world there in The Dark Crystal is pretty bleak. Characters die, and the tone is pretty heavy. So this doesn't have like a comforting, safe energy that all modern kids movies have today, unless they're pushing, something one way or the other, and that's a whole other thing. 80s movies didn't do that. They might have introduced us to real life, but they didn't push anything on us, but they did set us up for some emotional trauma with the movies that we love, and Dark Crystal is one. It comes in at number 10. Now, number 9 is one that some people in my other comment section mentioned, and to be honest, I just picked this movie up on a Vestron Blu-ray. I hadn't watched it in a long time, but Little Monsters definitely belongs on this list. It's way darker than you remember and just kind of creepy. Fred Savage discovers a monster living under his bed, played by Howie Mandel, which is kind of interesting given what we know about Howie Mandel and his germophobia, and he's playing a monster under a bed. But his character introduces Fred Savage to a hidden world of chaotic creatures that come out at night. It's very much Monsters, Inc. before Monsters, Inc., though Monsters, Inc. is darker if you dig deeper than it seems on the surface. And just like that, this one is fun at first. Pranks, chaos, monster mischief, but then the movie gets weirdly intense. The monster world is kind of disturbing. There's a real sense of danger that's growing, and there are these moments where the tone shifts from goofy to genuinely unsettling. Plus, there's the underlying theme about growing up and the losing innocence, which is kind of heavy for a movie that was mostly marketed towards kids. It's funny, but it has a darker edge to it than a lot of people remember, and that makes it absolutely belong on this list. Little Monsters comes in at number 9. Now, number 8 is one that's so scary it kind of traumatized a generation and got me to get an old school prop to kind of hit home how creepy this one is. I'm talking about The Witches. Listen, this cover doesn't do it justice. It is much creepier than that. Yes, I have the old VHS, and this movie is based on the Roald Dahl book, which already, when that's the author, you're leaning dark and creepy and weird. And The Witches follow a young boy who discovers that witches are in fact real and they hate children. Like really, really hate children. So this movie has some serious body horror in it. Transformation scenes, terrifying makeup, and a tone that doesn't pull any punches. And the scene where all of the witches transform and Angelica Houston as the Grand High Witch transforms is genuinely frightening, and she's incredible in this. That scene is incredible from a practical effects standpoint, makeup, body horror, all that. It kicks this movie into full-blown horror, in my opinion. So when they reveal their true forms, it is pure nightmare fuel. This is a kids' movie that absolutely trusted its audience to handle fear, and it delivered, and we're stronger for it and still talking about it today. The Witches had to be on this list. Now, at number 7, we go to Disney, because Disney has some dark stuff, but nothing darker than The Black Cauldron. There was a time in the 80s when Disney went through a phase and they said, what if we continue to make children's movies, but also make them extremely dark? And that's what you get with The Black Cauldron. The Black Cauldron is probably the closest Disney ever got to a full-on dark fantasy horror film for kids. You've got undead armies, creepy villains, like world apocalypse stakes here, and a tone that is way heavier than most Disney films, at least on the surface. It was so dark, in fact, that later on Disney tried to bury it. They've tried to bury it for years. But for those of us who saw it as kids, it definitely left an impression. The Black Cauldron doesn't feel safe in any way, and that's why it stuck with us. It feels like something you should watch around Halloween. It's that kind of creepy and heavy, and I kind of dig it. I mean, what can I say? But it just shows you how our mindset was different then and what we could handle, and kind of shaped us. Maybe that's the reason why Gen X is so hard to offend these days. But The Black Cauldron comes in at number 7. Now, I'm going to need you to hang with me on number 6 here a little bit, because some of you might push back, but I'm going to argue that Willow definitely needs to be on this list. Now, it's more of a classic adventure movie, no doubt, but it still goes way darker than people remember. The story follows a humble farmer. You got Willow, who's protecting a baby destined to destroy the evil queen. And that sounds like a perfect fantasy setup. And then you get this dark stuff. You get all the dark magic, body transformations, like blood ritual type stuff with that dark magic, genuinely creepy creatures and attacks, people really getting killed in the movie, and some surprisingly intense moments. The queen is terrifying. You get some transformation sequences where you even see skin in here, the body horror of all that kind of stuff. Dead bodies, Mad Mardigan. I love Val Kilmer in this, though. This movie respects a young audience by not sugarcoating the story, but it feels like it's headed more towards like Excalibur and Conan and stuff like that than it does necessarily a kid's movie. So I'm going to argue that Willow should be on this list. I have it here at number 6. Now, at number 5, I have the one that you could argue could be number 1 on this list, and that is 1986's Transformers, the movie. Listen, if you were there and you saw it when it came out like I did, you remember, because this thing opened up with something that most children's films will never do. They never dared to do. That is kill off major characters and kill them off quickly, brutally, and without warning. Optimus Prime's death alone was like enough to emotionally wreck me and most of a generation. I mean, that is Optimus Prime. What are you doing? Well, they did it because they hoped to wipe out all the original Transformers so that they could sell new toys by introducing new characters. That was the plan. It didn't work. People weren't having it. But this movie was full of war imagery, apocalyptic stakes to this thing, and a tone that's super heavy. You got a world eating people. Listen, the death and destruction in this movie, next level. The movie didn't treat kids like they needed to be protected or from big emotions. Now, it did it for ulterior motives of selling toys, but this movie just went for it, and that's why we're talking about it decades later. I have it sitting right over there. It's an all-timer. It comes in at number 5. Now, number 4 is one that is sneaky, and some of you might push back on me, but Back to the Future definitely deserves to be here. Now, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's one of my favorites of all time. Adventurous, fun, all that kind of stuff. But let's be honest, it's pretty adult too. You've got the time travel paradoxes. That's fine. It's science fiction. You can get past that. You got some attempted assaults there from Biff that's kind of uncool. You got your Ooh La La magazine and all that stuff. All that pales in comparison to Marty's mother getting the hots for him. And then it gets disturbing just a little bit and hard to explain to a 6-year-old at the time. Like, what? That's just creepy. And then you have a story that's built around keeping you from being erased from existence. Now, as kids, we watched it for the time travel, the fun, the crazy experiments, the DeLorean. But as an adult, you realize how layered it was and occasionally dark and icky with the mother-son thing. But the movie trusted its audience. It's an all-time classic, but a little bit more adult than you remember. Now, number 3, I have written all over me right here, and that is Ghostbusters. Look, technically a comedy and all of that. It's full of, get your family to the theater vibes, but it's also full of supernatural horror and adult humor, adult situations, sexual situations, jokes that went over kids' heads at the time. You've got ghosts, demons, the end of the world, but you also have Dan Aykroyd's character there dreaming about an incubus. Is it incubus or succubus? One of those two. That's an awkward one to explain. And then you have, the gate master and the key master and the gatekeeper trying to get together. You got to explain all that. You got Venkman trying to get into Dana's pants the whole time. You've got Rick Moranis trying to get into her pants, and then apparently he does as the gate master and the key master and the gatekeeper. I keep wanting to combine them. But it walks that line between funny and creepy. There's drinking. There's all kinds of stuff. But it is an absolute classic and one of my favorite movies of all time. It still had to be here. Ghostbusters comes in at number 3. Now, at number 2, I don't think I will get any pushback on Gremlins. Look, it made some of my horror movie lists around Halloween. It made horror movie lists around Christmas time. It's a horror movie. It's a creature feature. Yes, it's got Steven Spielberg behind it and Chris Columbus, but it's got Joe Dante in there directing it, and he can't help himself. You got gremlins getting blended up and microwaved. It starts out all cute and fuzzy. It's basically Bedford Falls, snow and snuggly, and then boom, creature feature. And this movie is one of the movies that gave us the PG-13 rating because they didn't even know what to do with it. So you have all these little gremlins attacking the town, people really getting killed, hurt, maimed, all the gremlin gross imagery in this thing, the threats, on the dog even. There's a lot of creepy, heavy stuff in here. And of course, it is one of the films that helped the PG-13 rating exist. And besides all that, there is the way less than lighthearted monologue that Phoebe Cates gives about Christmas and her father and all that just grinds it to a halt. It's funny, it's classic, but it's also dark, weird, and disturbing, and we absolutely loved it then and now. Gremlins comes in at number 2. Now, number 1, I think, is probably the unquestioned GOAT for a lot of you, and I'm going to have to agree that Return to Oz should be number 1. Listen, technically a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, but it feels like a dark fantasy nightmare that you're trapped in, fever dream you can't wake up from. Dorothy is taken to a mental institution, which already is creepy and unsettling because it's like she's being institutionalized for what happened before. Electroshock therapy implications there. The villains are terrifying. The Wheelers alone, traumatized kids of an entire generation. They're just creepy. And then you have the Queen with her interchangeable heads in like the Hall of Heads that it shows. And it's a constant eerie post-apocalyptic feeling atmosphere, fever dream that has this constant sense of danger. It does not feel like a safe children's film in any way. It feels like a dream that you're not sure you want to have and you'd like to wake up from, and that's why it's number 1. And that's what I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. 80s kids movies didn't treat us like we were fragile. They challenged us, they pushed us, and they made us tougher for it. And we love them and still talk about them today. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.